The morning sun was pale and thin over London, filtering through a sky that looked like washed-out linen. It was the kind of damp chill that settled into the bones, the kind that made locals walk faster and tourists pull their jackets tighter. Outside the walls of Horse Guards Parade, the pavement sparkled with a fine mist, and the scent of wet stone mingled with the diesel growl of double-decker buses. Isabella de Laurentiis did not walk. She glided. Her heels, despite the slippery cobbles, clicked with the confidence of a woman who had never been told she couldn't go somewhere. The caramel-colored Birkin bag hung in the crook of her elbow as though it had been sewn there at birth. Her hair, blown smooth and expensive, moved as one solid sheet when she turned her head. She was 27 years old, and an heiress to a Connecticut plastics fortune, and she had spent her entire life being looked at. She had never, not once, learned to look back. Behind her, her companion Marcus struggled with the weight of a shopping bag from Fortnum and Mason and the guilt of having suggested this trip. "We could get tea," he offered weakly, shifting the bag from one hand to the other. "Brown's does that thing with the cucumber, the crustless one you like." Isabella didn't answer. She was staring at the horse. It was a magnificent creature, a glossy black mountain of muscle and breeding, standing perfectly still as though carved from obsidian. Upon its back sat a soldier of the King's Guard, ramrod straight, his brass helmet glinting under the gray sky. His face was blank, not stoic, not stern, blank, as though someone had erased him. Then Isabella had seen pictures of the guards on Instagram. They were backdrop, props, something you stood next to prove you had been somewhere. "He's not moving," she observed, tilting her head. "That's sort of the job," Marcus said. She stepped closer. The horse's ear twitched. The soldier stared at a fixed point exactly 1,000 yards away. A small brass sign was bolted to the railing nearby. It read, in clean block letters, "Beware. Horses may kick or bite." Isabella did not read it. She was not in the habit of reading instructions meant for other people. In her mind, she was already framing the shot, the contrast of her cream cashmere against the deep black of the horse, the soldier's red tunic, her scarlet lipstick. It would be perfect. It would be the best photo of her trip, better than the one at the London Eye, and better than the one pretending to push a car at Abbey Road. This one would have edge, power. She handed her phone to Marcus without looking at him. "Wide angle. Get my good side." She approached the horse from the flank. She was close enough now to smell the animal. Warm leather, hay, the deep, earthy scent of a living thing that owed her nothing. The horse shifted its weight. Its eye, dark and wet and the size of a plum, tracked her. Isabella smiled. She reached for the reins. Later, people would ask her why she did it. She would say she didn't know. She would say it was instinct. But instinct was not the word. Instinct was survival. What she felt was entitlement. She had paid for this trip. She had paid for the hotel, the bags, the shoes. London was hers to consume, and this horse was simply another item on the menu. Bent her fingers closed around the black leather. The horse moved like a snake. One moment its head was still, the next it had snapped around with a speed that seemed to bend physics. The teeth found the soft flesh of her upper arm, just below the cap sleeve of her sweater. They sank in. Not a nip, not a warning. A clamp. Isabella screamed. It was not a ladylike sound. It was raw, animal. The noise of a woman who had never felt real pain discovering it all at once. She tried to pull back, but the horse held her, shaking its head slightly as though she were an especially stubborn tuft of grass. The world tilted. Her heel slipped on the wet stone. She went down hard, the Birkin bag skidding across the pavement, its brass locks scratching against centuries-old cobbles. The soldier did not move. His eyes did not flicker. And his hands remained fixed on the pommel of his saddle. He had been trained for gunfire, for riot, for the chaos of war. A tourist grabbing the reins was Tuesday. Marcus was shouting. Tourists were gathering, phones out, the hungry click of shutters filling the air. A woman knelt beside Isabella, pressing a crumpled handkerchief to the blooming red stain on her sleeve. "Don't move, love, don't move. You're all right." But Isabella was not all right. She was lying on the ground in her 4,000-pound outfit, her arm on fire, her dignity bleeding out onto the stone. And the soldier, the servant, the prop, the man she had not even registered as a person, continued to stare straight ahead, as though she did not exist. For the first time in her life, Isabella de Laurentiis looked at someone and realized they did not see her. The police arrived within 3 minutes. Not the tourist-friendly Met Police with their neon vests and patient smiles, but a different kind of officer, armed, broad-shouldered, a man whose face carried the weathered patience of someone who had spent 20 years explaining basic human decency to people who should have learned it in kindergarten. His name was Constable David Thorne, and he was very, very tired. He assessed the scene with a single sweep of his eyes. The woman on the ground now sitting up cradling her arm, the panicked boyfriend, the ring of tourists recording everything, the soldier still as stone, the horse, peaceful now, blinking slowly as though nothing had happened. Thorne had seen this 100 times. Different faces, different accents, same story. And someone had treated the guard like a wax figure and gotten a sharp reminder that flesh and blood could bite back. Usually they slunk away embarrassed, posting the video with a rueful caption. But this woman was not slinking. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded, her voice thin and shaking. Not from the pain, from the insult. Thorne crouched beside her. "I'm going to need you to step away from the horse line, ma'am." "That animal attacked me. I want to press charges." "That animal," Thorne said evenly, "is a member of the British Army, the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment. He has served 2 tours in Afghanistan and is trained to respond to active threat conditions." Isabella blinked. "It's a horse." "He's a soldier," Thorne corrected. "Same as the man on his back, same as me. And you grabbed his reins. Which is a direct interference with his duties. I was taking a picture. You were in his space. He warned you." Thorne nodded toward the sign, still unread, still ignored. "They always warn you first. The ear goes back, the head turns. You didn't look." Marcus stepped forward, his voice wobbling. "She's bleeding. She needs a hospital." Thorne glanced at the wound. It was ugly. Teeth marks, deep bruising already rising, but not life-threatening. He'd seen worse from a Jack Russell. "There's a walk-in clinic on Buckingham Gate. You can have that looked at." "Walk-in?" Isabella's voice pitched upward. "I'm not walking anywhere. I need an ambulance. I need to speak to someone from the embassy. This is an assault." Thorne stood up. His knees cracked. He was too old for this, too tired. And he had a sudden, an aching desire for a cup of tea that was actually hot. "Ma'am, I'm going to be very clear with you. That soldier and his mount are on duty. They are guarding a royal residence. You interfered with that duty. The appropriate response to being bitten by a horse you touched is not legal action. It is reflection." Isabella stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her this way. Her father, when displeased, communicated through lawyers. Her boyfriends communicated through silent treatments and expensive gifts. Direct confrontation, honest words, had always been buffered by money. She opened her mouth to respond, but Thorne was already turning away. He had a word with the soldier, low, respectful, and the soldier gave a small nod. Then Thorne walked back toward his vehicle. leaving Isabella on the ground with her ruined sleeve and her scratched handbag, and the slow, dawning realization that the world was not, in fact, a mirror. The videos went viral before she reached the clinic. By the time the nurse was wrapping Isabella's arm in sterile gauze, the clip had been viewed 400,000 times. By dinner, it was at 2 million. The comments were brutal. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. She thought the sign was a suggestion. Birkin bag, but no brain. The horse is the only one here with any sense? Isabella scrolled through them in the back of the Uber, her jaw tight, her good hand white-knuckled around her phone. Marcus sat beside her in miserable silence. He had tried to hold her hand earlier. She had pulled away. "They don't understand," she whispered. They weren't there. Marcus said nothing. He was looking at his own phone, at the same comments, and wondering when exactly he had become the kind of man who stood silently while his partner made a fool of herself. The hotel doorman, who had smiled at her every morning for a week, now looked through her as though she were made of glass. The concierge, when she requested a late checkout, informed her that the hotel was fully booked and perhaps she might consider alternative accommodations. His tone was impeccably polite. His eyes were not. Isabella spent that night alone. Marcus had taken his own room, claiming exhaustion. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed, her bandaged arm resting on a silk pillow, and watched the views climb. 2.5 million, 3 million. The horse had become a meme. Someone had photoshopped a crown onto its head. Someone else had turned her scream into a soundbite. She closed her phone. She did not sleep. The next morning, she did something she had never done before. She canceled her appointments. She postponed the private viewing at Christie's, the lunch at Scott's, the fitting with the Mayfair tailor who had once dressed a duchess. She told herself she needed rest. She told herself the arm was throbbing. But at 10 o'clock, she found herself standing outside the Horse Guards building. The same cobbles beneath her heels, the same pale sky overhead. A different soldier sat a different horse. Neither looked at her. She waited. An hour passed, then 2. Her feet ached. Her arm ached. Her pride, that old familiar companion, was silent. At noon, Constable Thorne emerged from the building, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. And he stopped when he saw her. "Ma'am." "I don't want to press charges," she said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, smaller. I wanted to understand." Thorne studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a short, sharp movement, and jerked his head toward the building. "You want to understand? Come with me." He took her inside. The barracks smelled of boot polish and gun oil. Men and women in uniform moved through the corridors with purpose, their boots echoing against stone floors worn smooth by 2 centuries of pacing. Portraits of long-dead monarchs stared down from the walls, their painted eyes following Isabella as she walked. Thorne led her to a stable block. The horse stood in its stall, placid now, a gray muzzle buried in a net of hay. It did not look up when she approached. His name is Cromwell," Thorne said. "He's 13 years old. He's done 2 tours in Helmand Province. He's been shot at, blown up, and once carried a wounded soldier 3 miles to a field hospital. He doesn't bite people because he's mean. He bites people because he's frightened, and frightened horses react on instinct. Same as soldiers, same as any of us." Isabella looked at the horse. The horse, indifferent, continued eating. "He doesn't remember you," Thorne said. "You were a moment, a loud noise, a sharp pressure. He reacted. You went away. It's over. Horses don't hold grudges. That's a human luxury." Isabella's throat was tight. "I didn't think he was real." "I know. I knew he was real. But I didn't... I thought he was just for show. Like a statue you can take pictures with." Thorne was quiet for a moment. And then he said, "You ever been to Arlington? The cemetery in Virginia?" She nodded. "You ever see the guards at the tomb of the unknown soldier? 21 steps, 21 seconds. They do it 24 hours a day, rain or shine, hurricane or blizzard. Tourists take pictures, kids run around, but no one touches them. No one grabs their rifles or tries to make them laugh. You know why?" Isabella swallowed. "Respect." "Yeah," Thorne said. "Respect. These men and women, they're not here for your Instagram. They're here because this is what they do. This is who they are. And when you treat them like props, you're not just embarrassing yourself, you're telling them they don't matter." Isabella looked at her feet. The floor was clean, swept, cared for by someone who took pride in their work. She thought about her Birkin bag, unscratched now, sitting in the hotel safe. She thought about the concierge's eyes. She thought about Marcus, who had texted her this morning to say he was extending his stay in London but needed some space. "What do I do?" she asked. Her voice was barely audible. Thorne shrugged. "That's up to you. You can go home, pretend it never happened. Most people do. Or you can stay, and maybe figure out why you thought any of this was yours to take." He left her there, standing in the straw, facing a horse that had already forgotten her name. She stayed for a long time. The week that followed was the strangest of Isabella de Laurentius's life. She did not leave London. She did not post on social media. She turned off her phone notifications and ignored the steady drip of emails from her publicist, her mother. As the family lawyer who had somehow gotten wind of a potential liability issue. Instead, she walked. She walked through St. James's Park, watching the pelicans drift across the lake like small white battleships. She walked along the south bank, past the bookstalls and buskers, the smell of fried onions drifting from food carts. She walked through the British Museum, standing for 20 minutes in front of the Rosetta Stone, trying to understand how a single object could hold 3 languages and still refuse to speak. She did not take pictures. She did not touch anything. On Thursday, she found herself back at Horse Guards. This time, she did not approach the barrier. She stood at the railing, hands clasped behind her back, and watched. The soldier on duty was young, younger than her, probably, with a face that had not yet learned to harden completely. He stood perfectly still, his mount patient beneath him. Isabella watched for 45 minutes. She watched the way his eyes moved, scanning the crowd. She watched the way he adjusted his weight, subtle shifts that kept both man and horse comfortable. She watched tourists approach, take their pictures, retreat. She watched a mother lift her toddler onto her shoulders for a better view. She watched an elderly veteran salute, his hand shaking, and she watched the soldier return it with a small, almost imperceptible nod. She went back the next day, and the next. On Saturday, Thorne found her again. He was off duty, wearing a plain jacket, carrying a paper bag from a bakery. He nodded toward the guard. "Still here?" "Still here," Isabella said. He pulled a croissant from the bag, offered it to her. She hesitated, then took it. "You know," Thorne said, chewing, "most people who go viral do the apology video. Cry a little. Say they've learned their lesson. Get their sympathy clicks and go back to normal." "I don't want sympathy clicks." "What do you want?" Isabella looked at the croissant in her hand. It was flaky, imperfect, shedding butter on her fingers. She had spent her entire life avoiding messes. Now she was covered in them. "I want to understand why I did it," she said. "Not just the horse. Everything. Why I thought the rules didn't apply to me. Why I thought I could take whatever I wanted. I've been like this my whole life, and no one ever stopped me. No one ever even told me I was doing it wrong." Thorne was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Oh, my daughter's a teacher. Inner city, Birmingham. She's got kids in her classroom who show up hungry, wearing shoes with holes in them, and she tells them they can be anything. Doctors, engineers, artists. And sometimes she lies awake at night wondering if she's setting them up for disappointment. Isabella didn't know what to say. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, Thorne said. I'm telling you because you asked. You've got all this. The money, the looks, the connections. You were born on third base, and you think you hit a triple. That's not your fault. But it is your responsibility. He finished his croissant, brushed the crumbs from his jacket. You want to understand? Then do something. Not a performance, not a charity gala where you buy a table and pose for pictures. Something real. Something that costs you. He walked away. Isabella stood alone, the half-eaten croissant growing cold in her hand, the soldier still as stone behind her. That evening, she made a phone call. Not to her mother, not to her lawyer, not to the publicist who had been begging her to schedule a rehabilitation interview. She called the one person who had never asked her for anything. Marcus? It's me. I need a favor. There was a long pause. Then, what kind of favor? I need you to find out who manages the regimental charity for the household cavalry. Another pause. Isabella, what are you doing? She looked at her reflection in the dark window of her hotel room. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Same hair, same face, same expensive sweater. But the eyes were different, uncertain, human. I'm trying to learn, she said. Oh, how to be real. The regimental charity office was located in a converted stable block behind Wellington Barracks. It smelled of dust and old paper, and the radiator in the corner coughed like an elderly smoker. A woman named Margaret ran the office. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had spent 40 years herding military bureaucracy into submission. She looked at Isabella across her cluttered desk, unimpressed. You're the horsewoman. Isabella flinched. Yes. We don't usually get celebrities in here. Except for the patrons, of course. Princess Anne pops by twice a year, but she brings her own tea. I'm not a celebrity. Margaret raised one eyebrow. The gesture conveyed with remarkable efficiency that she had seen the viral video, read the comments, and had formed her own conclusions. Isabella set down her handbag. Not the Birkin. She had put that in storage, unable to look at the scratched lock without wincing. This was a plain black tote she had bought at a shop near the hotel. It cost 40 pounds and smelled faintly of synthetic leather. I want to volunteer, she said. Not write a check, not be on a board. I want to actually work, filing, cleaning, whatever you need. I want to earn the right to be here. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of papers, and slid them across the desk. Start with these. They need sorting by regiment and date. Don't use staples. Paper clips only. The archives are sensitive to metal. Isabella nodded. She took the papers, found an empty corner of the office, and began to work. The hours passed slowly, and her manicured fingers, accustomed to typing emojis and swiping credit cards, struggled with the delicate task of separating brittle pages. She made mistakes. She bent a corner. Margaret corrected her without comment, but Isabella felt the weight of it anyway. At lunchtime, she ate a sandwich at her desk. It was tuna, slightly dry, on bread that tasted faintly of cardboard. She ate every bite. In the afternoon, she was tasked with photographing artifacts for the charity's online catalog. A medal from the Crimean War, a tarnished whistle from Dunkirk, a letter written in pencil from a soldier in the trenches of the Somme. The handwriting was tiny, cramped, desperate to fit as much love as possible onto a single sheet of paper. I hope "This finds you well," Isabella read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "I hope the children remember my face. I hope you know I think of you every moment." Margaret was watching her. "That one's my favorite, too. He survived, you know, lived to be 92. His granddaughter donated the letter last year." Isabella looked at the fragile paper in her hands. She thought about her own grandfather, who had left her a trust fund and a signed photograph of himself with 3 presidents. She had never asked him about the war. She had never asked him about anything. "I don't know anything," she said. "All this time, I thought I was educated. I went to the best schools, traveled the world. But I don't know anything at all." Margaret's voice, when she finally spoke, was softer. "You're here. That's a start." The days blurred into a routine. Isabella arrived at the office at 8 each morning, before the tourists clogged the pavements, before the guards changed over in their precise, centuries-old choreography. She sorted papers. She cleaned artifacts. She learned the difference between the Blues and Royals and the lifeguards, gloves, plumes, the placement of a brass button. She learned that the horses were not interchangeable, that each had a name and a personality and a preference for carrots over apples. She learned that Constable Thorne had been wrong about one thing. Cromwell did remember her. She visited him in the stables every evening. She brought carrots, sliced lengthwise so he wouldn't choke. At first, he ignored her, his massive flank turned to her approach. But she was patient. She came back, day after day, until one evening he lowered his head and breathed warm air across her palm. She didn't cry. She was not yet that person. But something in her chest loosened, a knot she hadn't known she was carrying. Marcus visited her at the office. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, clutching a takeaway coffee, watching her tape a box of donation receipts. "You look different," he said. "I haven't washed my hair in 3 days." "That's not what I mean." She set down the tape. "I know." They walked together through the park, the same path she had traced alone so many times. The pelicans were sleeping, heads tucked under wings. The sky was the same washed-out linen. Everything was the same, and everything had changed. "I'm not angry," Marcus said. "I was at first. Not because of the video or the embarrassment. Because I watched you hurt yourself, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to reach you." Isabella stopped walking. "I'm sorry. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What I was. What I did." Marcus looked at her. Really looked. "What are you now?" She considered the question. It was the first time anyone had asked. "I don't know," she said. "Something else. Something in progress." He nodded slowly. Then he reached out tentatively and took her hand. It was not the polished, manicured hand he had held at the airport 2 weeks ago. Her nails were bare. Her cuticles were rough from paper cuts. There was a faint callus forming on her palm. "Okay," he said. "Progress is good." They walked in silence until the path curved and the palace came into view. The guard was changing. Soldiers in red and black moved in perfect synchronization, their boots striking the stone in unison. Tourists watched, cameras raised. Children waved small Union Jacks. Isabella did not reach for her phone. She stood still, Marcus beside her, and watched the soldiers move through their ancient ritual. They were not performing. They were working. There was a difference, and now, finally, she understood it. "I have to give something back," she said. "Not money. Something real." Marcus waited. "I'm going to fund a program. For veterans. Not a building with my name on it. Not a scholarship that just pays for rich kids to go to richer schools. Something small, practical. Riding therapy for soldiers with PTSD. Cromwell's already trained for it, Margaret told me. They need funding for more horses. It's not charity. It's restitution. I took something that wasn't mine. His dignity, his safety. I can't give that back, but I can give something else. To him and to the others like him. Marcus squeezed her hand. That's not progress, he said. That's revolution. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Isabella de Laurentius stood at the rail of Horse Guards Parade and watched the first session of the Cromwell program take place. 4 veterans, their faces weathered by war and its aftermath, sat astride 4 massive horses. They moved in slow circles around the arena, guided by therapists and grooms. Cromwell himself stood at the center, patient as stone, his rider a young corporal who had lost his leg to an IED in Helmond. The corporal's name was James. He was 24 years old. He had not spoken above a whisper in 18 months. Today, and as the horse moved beneath him, steady and sure, James looked up at the gray sky and smiled. Isabella did not take a picture. She did not post about it. She stood quietly, hands clasped behind her back, and watched the miracle unfold. Constable Thorne appeared beside her. He was holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed her one. "You stayed," he said. "Yes," Isabella said. "I stayed." They watched the horses circle. The sun broke through the clouds, pale and thin, washing the parade ground in soft gold. Somewhere, a tourist laughed. A soldier called out a command. The city hummed around them, indifferent and eternal. Isabella raised her cup. To progress, Thorne raised his. To revolution. They drank. The horses walked. The world, stubborn and beautiful, continued turning.